What's going on with all this hype on the decarbonization of industries? Let's check it out! Hey, what is up guys? Welcome once again to the channel. It's always great to have you back. And yes, I'm pretty sure that you may have seen a lot of these trends on the decarbonization, on the removal of CO2 or technologies on sequestration or how to hide essentially carbon emissions. It has been already a hot topic, but I would say that now it's taken very seriously. Mostly because we have seen a lot of changes going on, especially on climate changes. We have seen droughts, we have seen typhoons, we have seen the melting of ice on the north and south poles, and a lot of other things that are strictly associated with climate change, which is mostly due to the CO2 that we are producing. Hence the importance of not only minimizing carbon dioxide, but trying to remove the existing carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. And what I want to do in this video is not only explore decarbonization, what it is, why is it important, but trying to explore all the technologies or all the ways in which this is achieved nowadays. So, what is exactly decarbonization? It is the process of reducing the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere. This can be achieved through a variety of means, such as switching to renewable energy sources, improving energy efficiencies, and reducing the use of fossil fuels. The goal of decarbonization is to achieve net zero carbon emissions, which means that any emissions produced are offset by an equal amount of emissions reduction. And this net zero concept is key. We're going to be analyzing that, of course, there are certain type of processes that will for sure produce CO2. But the idea is that there's another process or another methodology which is going to recover that CO2, and eventually what's going to happen is that the total production of carbon dioxide will be eventually net zero. So the very first way of decarbonization that we're going to be exploring is going into renewables, which I'm pretty sure that you have heard a lot. Wind energy, solar energy, biomass, and many other technologies. But the general idea is not to simply shift for the sake of shifting. We are changing our ways of production in order to ensure that there is no fossil fuel burning or combusting. What many of us don't understand is that energy is by far one of the most important aspects to consider whenever going into the idea of decarbonization. And what I mean with this is that the energy that we use in order to produce other type of energy is key. We're talking about the energy used in the industry, we're talking about the energy used for transportation, and we're talking about the energy used for commercial and residence use. This is by far one of the biggest chunk on CO2 productions that we can go directly. Hence the idea of going for renewables. This way we can ensure the decarbonization by avoiding the combustion of fossil fuels and simply going for solar energy, wind, and many other technologies. Another very important concept, yet very powerful one, is the improvement of the efficiencies of the existing energy system. And what I mean with this is that there's a lot of ways in which we could, in theory, already improve our use of energy. We're talking about mostly into industrial processes, but I'm also talking about the ways in which maybe houses are heated up or cooled down if you're using air conditioning, doing the required maintenances in order to improve that the equipments are working in the highest efficiency possible. When we're talking about transportation, we are talking about using engines that are very efficient, that they improve the way in which they combust their fuels. And of course, we're also talking about fuels being improved in order to improve the overall efficiencies of motors and engines for the transportation system. As stated before, we were talking about the industry, and there's a lot of ways in which process engineers can already make an improvement in energy expenditure by making an energy analysis or economic analysis on which type of electrification or utilities could be improved. And of course, when we're talking about commercial use or residence use, we're talking about building materials, but not only the materials themselves, but trying to improve those type of materials. This way, they will be saving a lot of energy in cooling and heating. These are of course some examples, and I'm thinking on making a specific video on how the industry can save a lot of energy by simply making energy analysis. For instance, the famous pinch analysis, which is nothing more than a methodology used to minimize the energy consumption of existing chemical processes simply by optimizing the heat recovery of existing systems, existing flow rates, process conditions, and so on. The previous two topics were on reducing the CO2 formations, but we also need to explore the removal of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And what I'm talking about is the CCUS, or carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And what I'm talking about is essentially the technologies that involve capturing carbon dioxide emissions from maybe power plants or industrial processes and either storing or simply reuse it for other type of processes. All this in order to ensure that there is no more carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere. And this is the overall idea, to identify which type of processes are going to be the golden standard in the future and ensure that these are the most optimal ones, that they are technically feasible, that are safe to operate, and of course that are financially beneficial for our communities. I will be adding some content in the description below if you want to explore more on these technologies, but for now I'm going to be leaving you with these diagrams so you get a better understanding on what we're talking about. The electrification of transportation is key. And this is very funny because this was not a topic 20 years ago. We wouldn't talk that much into the electrification of overall transportation systems, but now it's something that it's not only a reality, but it's something that is now urgent to do. We're talking about going from fossil fuel power vehicles into the electrification of vehicles. One of the greatest advantages will be that first things first, we're not going to be doing these inefficient combustions. So we have these batteries which have a higher efficiency, and of course we're obtaining those electric charges from a very high efficient point. Hence, energy is being used more efficiently. Not only that, guys, the cities will no longer have these problems with air pollution because there will be no combustion at all. And although there is a lot of debate on where are we going to ensure the energy for all these electrification systems, I want to let you know that still making combustions in a much more efficient factory still will be better than having very inefficient combustions in individual combustion engines. The main idea, of course, of electrification is not to stick into fossil fuel, but eventually try to migrate to the renewables energies or other ways of obtaining energy that does not require the production of carbon dioxide. Biomass and biomass technologies and even planting trees or vegetation is something that is taking a lot of strength nowadays. The overall idea is to, of course, use all that carbon dioxide which is already in the atmosphere into the biomass or the vegetation. Overall idea will be to use that biomass for combustion, for production of other type of materials such as ethanol, oils, lubes, biodiesel, and biogasoline. Overall idea is, as you can imagine, that there is a net zero emission because all the CO2 that is already in the atmosphere is going to be forming the biomass, and whenever we combust the biomass, it's going to form this CO2 which was already in existence. This is by far one of my favorite ones because it really seems to be a natural approach, or going back to basics, to ensure that we use biomass, not only chemicals produced by humans, but also the biomass that we see in all Earth. Now, those are the main concepts or ideas of decarbonization, but for sure there are certain type of challenges, and one of the most important ones will be that the cost of transitioning from fossil fuels into renewables is very expensive. Still, we are looking for a lot of technologies that will ensure that the transition is worth it, at least financially speaking. This means that overall, if you ensure that there are certain type of technologies that are going to be cheaper than fossil fuel, naturally the market trends are going to go shifting from the fossil fuel to the renewable source. In this specific way, you don't need to educate, you don't need to do anything at all because the market is going to be shifting from left to right. Another challenge is, of course, that this may sound very first world problem in the sense that this is mostly taking into consideration into Europe, USA, Australia, Japan, and so on. Meaning that African countries, Latin America, Asian countries, and many other type of countries are not even considering the decarbonization technologies. Meaning that they are stick into fossil fuels and the transition is going to take much more longer than expected. And finally, guys, society itself needs to evolve. I know that I have been speaking about technologies and sciences and a little bit on the market, but overall the mind of our society needs to change from being a very high consumption fossil fuel beast into a much more educated, environmental friendly consumer. This way, society is going to help the transition of decarbonization of all these industries. And there you have it, guys. These are the challenges that we have nowadays with the decarbonization. So now we already know that there's a lot of things going on with decarbonization. It's not just about going from fossil fuel to renewables. We're talking about also electrification, working with biomass, improving efficiencies, and I will say more importantly, the carbon capture, utilization, storage, sequestration technologies. As you have seen already, we need help of a lot of technologies. There's no single way into going into decarbonization. We need to do this from all fronts. But on the other hand, myself as a process engineer, I am looking forward to see what will be the following trends on technologies. How important is going to be using energy very efficiently? How important is going to be going into renewable energies that are actually worth it? And also all the new technologies that are going to be improving the carbon capture or carbon utilization and storage. But for now, we need to see how things are going to be working out. And yeah, that will be it, guys. This is what I wanted to share with you. I really want you to keep the idea of decarbonization, yes, but more importantly, going net zero. That should be the goal for every engineer working in the industry. How can I improve this process or this technology in order to ensure a net zero carbon footprint? On my behalf, that will be it, guys. I'll see you in the next video.